Disclaimer, the story is true, but names and identities have been changed for anonymity.
My daughter called me at 10:15 in the morning. I remember the time exactly because I was staring at the clock on the wall of Dr. Thorne's private clinic. The second hand was sweeping past the 3, making that sterile, rhythmic tick-tick-tick sound that reminds you that your time on this earth is finite. I wasn't at the office. I wasn't at a board meeting. I was sitting in a paper gown, shivering slightly despite the heating, waiting for an oncologist to come in and tell me if the shadow on my left lung was a death sentence or just a scar from a past pneumonia. That is the kind of moment where you want your family. You want a hand to hold. You want someone to say, "Don't worry, Mom. Whatever it is, we will handle it." My phone buzzed in my purse. I saw the name on the screen, Clara. My heart actually jumped, a foolish biological reflex. I thought, she sensed it, a daughter's intuition. She's calling to check on me. I picked up the phone. My voice was raspy. "Hello, Clara?" I didn't hear a hello. I didn't hear a how are you. What I heard was the sound of wind, the roar of an engine, and my daughter's voice screaming in pure, unadulterated euphoria. "Mom, pick up, pick up. Okay, you're there. Listen, we did it. We're leaving tomorrow." I blinked, confused. The doctor's door remained closed. Leaving? Clara, what are you talking about? Leaving for where? "The trip, Mom, the European tour. Julian and I booked the first-class tickets an hour ago. And don't worry about the liquidity issue. We solved it. We solved everything." A cold dread started to seep into my stomach, colder than the fear of cancer. "Clara, what do you mean you solved it?" "We sold the house," she shrieked, "and the car, the vintage Jaguar. Julian found a buyer who paid cash for both, a private investor from Dubai. He wanted a turnkey property, furniture and all. He's wiring the rest of the money this afternoon, but he gave us a massive deposit in cash. We handed over the keys 10 minutes ago. We are rich, Mom. Well, you are rich, but we're taking our commission for the effort." I sat there, frozen. My beach house in the Hamptons, my sanctuary, the place where I scattered my late husband's ashes in the rose garden, and the Jaguar E-Type 1967, my husband's restoration project, the car he spent 5 years rebuilding with his own hands. "You sold my house," I whispered. "Oh, stop being so dramatic," Clara laughed. It was a cruel sound. "You never go there anymore. It was just sitting there gathering dust. We got $3 million for the house and $400,000 for the car. It's a steal, honestly, but we needed the cash fast to secure the apartment in Paris. We're doing you a favor. Downsizing is the trend, Mom." "Clara," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I am at the doctor." There was a pause on the line. For a second, I thought she might ask why. I thought she might show a flicker of humanity. "Okay," she said, her tone dismissive. "Well, hurry up. The notary needs you to email a photo of your ID for the file. Julian already signed the transfer papers using that power of attorney you gave him when you had your knee surgery years ago. Just send the ID, okay? We have a dinner reservation to celebrate. Bye." Click. She hung up. I sat there, holding the phone, staring at the blank screen. My children and my son had just sold my most sentimental possessions. They had invaded my property, invited strangers in, and handed over the keys to my life. And they did it while I was sitting in a hospital waiting room, facing my own mortality? They didn't care if I was sick. They didn't care if I was dying. To them, I wasn't a person. I was an obstacle. I was a vault that they needed to crack open. At that moment, the door opened. Dr. Thorne walked in. He looked serious. "Eleanor," he said softly, "I have the results." I didn't look at him. I looked at the phone in my hand. And then something strange happened. I started to laugh. It started as a small chuckle, dry and sharp. Then it grew. I laughed until my chest hurt. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. Dr. Thorne looked terrified. He probably thought I was having a breakdown from the stress of the diagnosis. "Eleanor," he asked, reaching for my arm, "are you all right?" I wiped a tear from my eye and looked at him. I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. "I'm fine, doctor. In fact, I'm better than fine. I just received some clarity, absolute crystalline clarity." "The results?" he started. "Tell me," I said. "It's benign," he smiled, relieved. "Just scar tissue. You're going to be fine. You're going to live a long time." "Good," I nodded, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "Because I have work to do." "Work? Eleanor, you should rest." "No, doctor. I have to plan a dinner." I walked out of that clinic into the bright sunlight of Manhattan. My driver, Thomas, opened the door of the limousine. "Back to the office, Mrs. Vance?" "No, Thomas," I said, a small, dangerous smile playing on my lips. "Take me to my lawyer's office. And Thomas, turn off the music. I need to think." You see, my children thought they were clever. They thought they had pulled off the heist of the century. They thought that power of attorney document from 3 years ago was their golden ticket. But there was something they forgot, something so simple, so fundamental, that only spoiled, arrogant children would overlook. When Clara told me, "We sold the house, the buyer has the keys," she didn't realize she wasn't confessing to a business deal. She was confessing to a felony. They had sold a house that, legally, did not belong to the person they thought it did, and that power of attorney had an expiration clause they never bothered to read. I leaned back in the leather seat of the car and watched the city pass by. "You want to play grown-ups," I whispered to the empty car. "Fine, let's see how you handle federal fraud charges." They wanted a celebration. I would give them a celebration. I was going to let them think they had won. I was going to let them spend the money. I was going to let them pack their bags for Paris. And then I was going to destroy them. But first, I needed to know exactly how deep their greed went. I needed to let them dig their own graves, inch by inch. I took out my phone and typed a message to Clara. "That is a surprise. We need to talk about the details. Come to the penthouse tonight. I'll order from that Italian place you like. Let's celebrate properly." I hit send. The game had begun, and unlike my children, I never lose. People often asked me, "Eleanor, how did it come to this? How does a woman who manages 20,000 employees and shipping routes across 3 oceans raise 2 thieves?" It is a fair question, and the answer is the most painful admission a mother can make. I did this. I built them, brick by expensive brick. While the car drove me toward the offices of Sterling and Cooper, I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. I thought about Julian. Julian was a beautiful child, golden hair, bright eyes, but he learned very early on that he didn't need to finish a puzzle to get the applause. He just needed to smile at the person holding the camera. When he was 22, he wanted to launch a sustainable crypto mining startup. I knew it was nonsense, but I wrote the check for $200,000. I told myself it was an education. He crashed the company in 6 months and bought a Porsche with the liquidation funds. When he was 25, it was a high-end tequila brand, Vance Agave, he called it. Another $300,000. The tequila tasted like gasoline, but the launch party in Tulum cost more than my first warehouse. And now, at 32, he was playing real estate tycoon with my assets. And Clara? Clara was different. Julian was incompetent, but Clara was malicious. She learned early that my guilt was a currency, and she became an expert day trader. Every time I missed a school play because of a merger in Tokyo, Clara would sigh, look at the floor, and say, "It's okay, Mom. I know work is more important." That sentence would cost me a pony, or a trip to Bali, or a diamond necklace. I bought their love because I didn't have time to earn it, and in doing so, I taught them that love is a transaction. I taught them that Eleanor Vance wasn't a person. She was a resource, a gold mine that never ran dry. The car stopped. I looked up. The Sterling Building. I walked into the lobby, the heels of my Louboutins clicking sharply on the marble. The receptionist, a young woman who looked terrified of me, scrambled to the phone. "Mrs. Vance, we weren't expecting you. Mr. Sterling is in a conference." "He will see me," I said, walking past her without breaking stride. Marcus Sterling was my pit bull in a three-piece suit. We had been through 3 recessions and 2 hostile takeover attempts together. He was the only man on earth who knew exactly how much I was worth, down to the cent. When I opened his office door, he was pouring a scotch. He froze. "Eleanor," he said, putting the glass down, "to what do I owe the pleasure? You look determined. I need you to pull the file on the power of attorney document I signed 3 years ago, the limited one for the knee surgery." Marcus raised an eyebrow. He moved to his computer, typing quickly. "The incapacitation clause document? Eleanor, that's archived. It expired the moment Dr. Aris signed your discharge papers. Why?" I sat down in the chair opposite him. I didn't take off my coat. "Because," I said, my voice devoid of emotion, "Julian and Clara used it this morning to sell the Hamptons estate and the Jaguar." Marcus stopped typing. He looked over me over his glasses. The silence in the room was heavy. "They what?" "They found a buyer, cash deal. They used the old POA to sign the transfer of deed. They handed over the keys. They believe the money is being wired to an account they control this afternoon." Marcus let out a low whistle. "Eleanor, that's fraud. That's grand larceny. If the buyer is legitimate, the sale is void ab initio because the POA was invalid. The title hasn't legally transferred. But if they took money— They took a deposit, and they are spending it as we speak. They booked first-class tickets to Europe." Marcus leaned back, his lawyer brain already calculating the damage control. "Okay, we can fix this. I can file an emergency injunction. We can freeze the assets, contact the buyer, explain the error. We can save the house. It will be messy, and your children might face some serious legal exposure, but we can shield them if we act now." He reached for the phone. "No," I said. Marcus froze, his hand hovering over the receiver. "No? Do not call the buyer. Do not file the injunction. Not yet. Eleanor, if we wait, the buyer will sue. The liability— I will cover the liability. I want the transaction to proceed, or, rather, I want them to believe it is proceeding." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down on the ants crawling on the pavement below. "Marcus, for 30 years I have shielded them. When Julian crashed his car, I paid the police. When Clara got caught shoplifting in Paris, I paid the boutique. I have always been the safety net, but a safety net doesn't just catch you, it traps you. It prevents you from hitting the ground, yes, but it also prevents you from learning that gravity is real." I turned back to him. "I am dying, Marcus. Well, not today. The doctor told me I'm fine, but the scare, it woke me up. If I die tomorrow, what happens to the Vance legacy? They will liquidate it in a month. They will sell the company, fire the employees, and snort the profits up their noses in Ibiza." "So, what is the plan?" Marcus asked, intrigued. "The plan is to let them hit the ground. I want you to draft a new document, a settlement agreement. I'm going to present it to them tonight." "What's in the agreement?" "I'm going to offer them a choice." I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "I'm going to tell them I know about the sale, and I'm going to tell them that I will ratify it. I will make the sale legal and let them keep the money, if they sign away their rights to the rest of my estate, permanently." Marcus's eyes widened. "The ultimate buyout." "Exactly. $8 million now, or the chance at hundreds of millions later. I want to see how cheap they really are. I want to see if they will sell their mother for quick cash. And if they sign— If they sign, I said, picking up my purse, I will sign the deed transfer. I will let them have the money, and then I will cut them off. No more credit cards, no more apartments, no more bailouts. They want to be rich adults? Fine, they can be rich adults for about 6 months until the money runs out, and then they will learn what poverty tastes like. It's cruel, Eleanor, said Marcus softly. It's necessary, I replied. Draft the papers, Marcus. Bring them to the penthouse at 8 p.m. Tell the doorman not to announce you. I want it to be a surprise. I walked out of the office. My heart was pounding, but not with fear. It was pounding with adrenaline. I checked my phone. A text from Julian. Hey, Mom, can't wait for tonight. We ordered the expensive wine. Don't be late. The smiley face. The audacity of the smiley face. He had just sold his father's car, a car his father loved more than anything, and he sent me a smiley face? I didn't reply. I got back into the car. Home, Thomas. I need to change for dinner. I need to look like a victim. The stage was set. The players were in motion. They thought they were walking into a victory lap. They didn't realize they were walking into an execution. But as I rode home, a small, treacherous part of me hoped. It hoped that when I offered them the choice, the money or me, they would choose me. It was a foolish hope, the hope of the mother who still remembered holding their small hands. But the CEO in me knew better. The CEO knew the data, and the data said they were going to take the cash and run. Tonight, I would find out what my life was actually worth to them. There is a specific theater to a family dinner. We all know our lines. We all know our blocking. I was standing by the window when the elevator dinged. It opens directly into the penthouse foyer, a feature that used to impress me, but now just felt like a security flaw. They didn't walk in, they erupted in. Mom! Clara's voice bounced off the marble floors. She was wearing a new dress. Balenciaga. I recognized the collection. It had been released 3 days ago. She must have put it on a credit card I pay for, anticipating the windfall she had just stolen from me. Julian followed her, carrying a magnum of Cristal champagne. Not one from my cellar, he had bought this, an investment in the illusion of wealth. "Where is the queen of the hour?" Julian shouted, popping the cork before he had even fully entered the room. Foam spilled onto my Persian rug. He didn't notice, or he didn't care. I turned from the window. I had chosen my outfit carefully. A black silk blouse, severe and unadorned, no jewelry. I wanted to look like a blank canvas. "I'm here," I said softly. They descended on me. Clara hugged me, but it was a performance. She smelled of expensive perfume and nervous energy. She didn't squeeze me. She patted me, checking for structural integrity. "You look great, Mom," she lied. "The doctor said everything was fine, right? We knew it. You're indestructible." "Indestructible," I repeated. "Yes, that is the word." "Here, drink." Julian shoved a glass of champagne into my hand. "To the future, to downsizing, to freedom." "To freedom," I echoed, taking a sip. It tasted acidic. We moved to the dining table. I had ordered the food, but nobody looked at it. The truffle risotto was getting cold. The branzino was untouched. They were feasting on something else. Adrenaline. "So," Julian started, leaning back in his chair, swirling his glass. "The buyer, total eccentric, didn't even want an inspection. He just walked through the Hamptons house, saw the view, and said, 'Done.' Can you believe that?" "And the car?" I asked. My eyes were fixed on the rim of my glass. "The Jaguar." "Oh, that was the cherry on top," Julian laughed. "He's a collector. He saw the E-Type in the garage and practically drooled. I told him, hey, for the right price, everything is for sale. He wired the deposit for the car separately. It's already in my offshore hold. Mom, that car was just sitting there rusting. I did you a favor. You can't drive a stick shift with your knees." My knees were fine. My heart, however, was currently being compressed by a vice. "Your father loved that car," I said. It was a test. I wanted to see if there was a flicker of remorse. Julian waved his hand dismissively. "Dad loved fixing the car. He never drove it. He's been gone 10 years, Mom. It's just metal. Let go of the past. That's your problem. You hoard things. We're helping you liquidate." Liquidate? That's a business term, Julian. This is a family home. "Same thing," Clara interjected, her mouth full of bread. "Assets are assets. Look, Mom, we've been talking. With this cash injection, Julian can finally start the development firm, and I can secure the gallery. We don't need you to co-sign anything anymore. We just need, the technicality." "The technicality?" "The deed transfer." Clara pulled a thick envelope from her designer bag. She slammed it on the table. It made a heavy, greedy sound. "The notary prepared everything. Since you're incapacitated, legally speaking, wink wink, Julian signed the initial sale, but the title company wants your signature to finalize the release of the full funds. Just sign here and here and here." She pushed the papers toward me. She pushed the Mont Blanc pen toward me. I looked at the papers. I looked at my children. They were vibrating with anticipation. They looked like wolves who had cornered a wounded deer. They didn't see a mother. They saw a signature. I reached out and picked up the pen. Julian stopped breathing. Clara leaned forward. I held the pen over the paper, and then I set it down. "No," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. The air conditioning hummed. A siren wailed in the distance. "What do you mean, no?" Julian asked, his smile faltering. "I mean I'm not signing, and I mean that the power of attorney you used to sell my house expired 3 years ago. It is void. The contract you signed with the buyer is fraud. The money you took is stolen." Julian's face went pale. "Mom, don't joke. The money is spent. We transferred the deposit to the travel agent and the lease on the loft. We can't give it back." "That sounds like a you problem," I said, taking a bite of the risotto. It was excellent. "You committed a felony, Julian. Grand larceny, fraud, forgery. If I call the buyer right now and tell you the truth, you will go to prison, both of you." Clara stood up, knocking her chair back. "You wouldn't. You're our mother." "I am," I agreed. "But today, in the waiting room, while I was waiting to find out if I had cancer, you were selling my memories. You didn't ask if I was okay. You asked for a code. You didn't offer help. You took." I looked them dead in the eye. "You have been eating me alive for 30 years, and I am done being the meal." Julian looked like he was going to vomit. "Mom, please, the buyer, these aren't nice people. If we don't deliver the title, they will come after us. They will sue us for everything." "I know," I said. "I checked the buyer, Mr. Petrov. He is known for being litigious and aggressive." "You have to help us, Mom. Fix it. You always fix it." "I can fix it," I said slowly. They both froze. Hope, desperate and pathetic, flooded their faces. "I can fix it," I continued. "I can validate the sale. I can sign these papers right now. I can make the fraud legal retroactively. You can keep the money. You can keep the $8 million. You can go to Paris. You can pretend you are successful." Yes, please, Mom," Julian begged. "But," I raised a finger. The doorbell rang. It was a sharp, authoritative sound. "Who's that?" Clara asked, wiping her eyes. "That," I said, "is Marcus Sterling, my lawyer." I stood up. I felt 10 feet tall. "I told you I could fix it. I didn't say I would do it for free. You want the $8 million. Fine, but you're going to buy it from me." "Buy it?" Julian was confused. "With what? We have nothing." "Oh, you have something," I said, walking toward the foyer to open the door. I opened the door. Marcus stood there, holding a black leather portfolio. He looked at the terrified faces of my children and gave a small, shark-like nod. "Good evening," Marcus said. "I hope I'm not interrupting dessert." "Not at all," I said, stepping aside. Turn back to my children. "Here's the deal. Marcus has a document. It is a full and final settlement of inheritance. If you want me to sign the deed and save you from prison, you will sign Marcus's document first." "What does it say?" Julian whispered. "It says that in exchange for the $8 million you stole today, you forfeit all and any future claims to my estate. You get the house money. That's it. When I die, whether it's tomorrow or in 30 years, you get zero. Nothing. No trust fund, no stock options, no family heirlooms." I leaned on the cable, my voice dropping to a whisper. "So, what will it be? 8 million now, or the chance at 300 million later? But remember, if you choose later, you go to prison today." The trap was sprung. The cheese was in the mousetrap. Now I just had to watch them snap their own necks. There is a moment in every high-stakes negotiation where the emotion evaporates and the calculator turns on. I watched it happen in real time. Julian was the first to reach for the document. His hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from a different kind of tremor, the tremor of a gambler weighing the odds. "So," Julian said, his voice dry, "let me get this straight. We sign this settlement, and the house sale goes through. We keep the 8 million. We walk away clean. No police, no lawsuits." "Correct," Marcus said. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Mrs. Vance will sign a ratification of the power of attorney, retroactively authorizing the sale. The funds will be legally yours. However, Clause 5 states clearly that upon signing, you irrevocably waive any right to contest Mrs. Vance's future will, trust, or estate distribution. You are essentially cashing out your inheritance today." Clara looked up, her eyes narrowing. She was doing the math. "But Mom is worth," she trailed off, looking at me, "hundreds of millions. The logistics company, the real estate portfolio, the stocks. 8 million it's nothing compared to that. It's crumbs." "It is crumbs," I agreed, taking a sip of my wine. "But it is crumbs you can eat today. The rest of the loaf, you might never see it." "What do you mean?" Clara snapped. "You're our mother. When you, eventually, you know—" "Die?" I offered. "Say it, Clara. When I die." "Well, yes. When you die, we get it all anyway. Why would we take 8 million now when we could have 300 million later?" I smiled. It was the smile of a predator who knows the prey has missed the exit. "Because, my darling, who says you will get it all later?" I stood up and walked slowly around the table, circling them. "You are assuming that I will die soon, but Dr. Thorne says I am healthy. I am 55. My mother lived to be 98. I could live another 40 years. Can you wait 40 years, Julian? Can you wait 40 years to pay off your debts, to start your projects?" Julian swallowed hard. 40 years was an eternity for a man who couldn't wait 5 minutes for an Uber. "And," I continued, "you are assuming the money will still be there. Maybe I'll decide to sell the company and donate everything to a cat sanctuary. Maybe I'll marry a 20-year-old fitness instructor and leave it all to him. Maybe I'll just spend it. I've never really spent my money, have I? I've been too busy working. Maybe it's time I started enjoying my billions." I leaned close to Julian's ear. "If you don't sign today, I am calling the police. That is a certainty. You go to prison for fraud. You get nothing, zero, and you will be disinherited anyway because I don't leave money to felons." "It's blackmail," Clara hissed. "It's a plea deal," Marcus corrected, "and it's a very generous one. Most victims of theft don't offer the thief a multi-million-dollar exit package." Julian looked at Clara. They started to whisper. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were saying. "Julian, she's bluffing about the prison, right?" Clara: "I don't know. Look at her eyes. She's not the mom who bakes cookies. She's the CEO." Julian: "I can't go to jail, Clara. I can't. And I owe the the investors a lot of money." Clara: "8 million is 4 million each. I can buy the loft outright. I can start the gallery. I'll be famous on my own. I won't need her." They were breaking. The immediate gratification was winning over the long-term investment. It is the classic failure of the entitled mind. They cannot perceive a future that is not now. Julian turned back to me. "We need a modification," he said, trying to sound tough. "No modifications," I said. "Just one," he insisted. "We keep the jewelry too. Grandma's emeralds, the ones in the safety deposit box. You give us the key." I almost laughed. He was negotiating for trinkets while signing away an empire. "Fine," I said, waving my hand. "Take the emeralds. They are gaudy anyway." "And," Clara added, "we want a non-disparagement clause. You can't tell anyone we, stole the house. We want to be able to say it was a gift." "Agreed," Marcus said, writing it into the margin. "Mrs. Vance will not press charges or publicly discuss the nature of the transaction, provided the terms are met." Clara looked at the document. She looked at the pen. $4 million, she whispered. "I can be free. I don't have to listen to your lectures anymore. I don't have to beg for my allowance." "That's right. Freedom, Clara. Isn't that what you always wanted? To be independent, to be a self-made woman." "I am self-made," she muttered, grabbing the pen. "I have the vision. I just needed the capital." She signed. She pressed the pen down so hard it almost tore the paper. Clara Vance. She pushed the document to Julian. Julian hesitated for 1 second longer. He looked at me, searching for what? Forgiveness? A last-minute reprieve? "You're really doing this, Mom? You're cutting us out?" "I am not doing anything, Julian. You are holding the pen. You are choosing prison or the payout. But know this. Once you sign that paper, you are not my heir anymore. You are just a man I used to know." Julian's jaw tightened. "Fine. If you want to be a cold-hearted bitch, be one. I don't need you. I have $4 million. I can turn that into 40 million in a year with the right crypto plays." He signed. Julian Vance. It was done. Marcus took the document immediately, checking the signatures, stamping it with his notary seal. "The transaction is concluded. The funds from the house sale will be released to your accounts within the hour. The emeralds will be sent to you by courier tomorrow." Julian stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked relieved, almost high. "Well, I guess that's it. Thanks for the dinner, Mom, although the risotto was a bit salty." "Yeah," Clara stood up too, grabbing her bag. "We're going to go celebrate, properly, in Paris. Don't wait up." They walked toward the door. They didn't look back. They didn't say, "I love you." They didn't even say goodbye. They walked out with $8 million and the smug satisfaction that they had won. They thought they had robbed me. I waited until the elevator doors closed. The silence returned to the penthouse. "Did they sign, Marcus?" I asked, although I saw them do it. "Ironclad," Marcus said, tapping the folder. They have legally waived all rights to the Vance estate. The conflict of interest is resolved. The parasite has been surgically removed." "Good," I said. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. "Marcus?" "Yes, Eleanor?" "How long do you think $4 million will last Julian?" Marcus chuckled. Knowing his spending habits and his investment strategies, 18 months, maybe 2 years if he's careful. "And Clara?" 3 years, until the gallery fails or she gets sued by an artist." "Perfect," I said. "Set a reminder on your calendar, Marcus, 2 years from today." "For what?" "For part 2 of the lesson, because when the money runs out, they will come back. They always come back. And when they do, I want to be ready to show them what poverty really looks like." I picked up my glass of wine. "Now, Marcus, sit down. Eat the risotto. It's delicious." I didn't cry that night. I slept better than I had in years. The surgery was a success. The cancer was benign, and the tumor of greed had been cut out of my life. But as I drifted off to sleep, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the intermission, because money given to a fool doesn't just disappear, it explodes. And I had just handed them a very large stick of dynamite. There's a specific term in the logistics industry called burn rate. It refers to the speed at which a company spends its available capital before it starts generating a profit. If your burn rate is too high, you crash. It is a simple law of physics. My children, however, seemed to believe they were exempt from gravity. For the first 6 months after the great severance, as I called it, the silence in my penthouse was absolute. No phone calls asking for bailouts, no text messages asking for favors. It was the most expensive silence I had ever purchased. $8 million. But the peace was worth every penny. But just because we weren't speaking didn't mean I wasn't watching. I didn't block them on social media. In fact, I did something far more clinical. I hired a private forensic accountant, Mr. Finch. His job wasn't to intervene. His job was simply to track their public spending and estimate their burn rate. Every Friday morning, along with my coffee, I received the Vance report. It became my favorite soap opera. Let's start with Clara. Clara moved to Paris as promised. She bought the loft in Le Marais. It cost 1.8 million euros. A sensible person would have stopped there, invested the remaining 2 million, and lived off the interest. Clara is not a sensible person. She is an aesthetic. According to her Instagram, which she rebranded to @ClaraVance_curator, the loft needed soul. Soul, apparently, costs $50,000 a square meter. She hired a trendy Italian architect who convinced her that walls were oppressive. She spent $300,000 gutting a perfectly good apartment to create an open-flow energy space. Then came the gallery opening. I watched the live stream of the opening night. It was painful. She had rented a warehouse in the 11th arrondissement. She filled it with art created by her new boyfriend, a man named Jean-Luc, who painted exclusively with organic beetroot juice. The crowd was exactly who you would expect. Parasites. Beautiful, thin, well-dressed people who smell money like sharks smell blood. They drank her champagne. They ate her caviar. They told her she was a visionary. Mr. Finch's report for that month was brutal. Venue rental, 40,000 euros. Catering, 25,000 euros. PR agency, 15,000 euros. Art purchases from Jean-Luc, 100,000 euros. She had spent nearly $200,000 in one night to sell 3 paintings for a total of 500 euros. But on Instagram, she was a queen. Living my truth. #self-made, #artlife, #Parisian dream. I liked the photo. It felt the polite thing to do. Then there was Julian. If Clara was burning money, Julian was incinerating it with a flamethrower. Julian didn't go to Paris, he went to Dubai. Because of course he did. Dubai is the mecca for men who think wearing a suit without socks constitutes a personality. He founded Vance Global Capital. I looked up the business registration. It was a shell company with a WeWork address. His LinkedIn profile updated overnight. CEO, angel investor, crypto visionary. Julian's strategy was fake it until you make it, but he forgot that you eventually have to make it. He leased a penthouse at the marina, he leased a McLaren, he leased a table at the most expensive club in the city every weekend. He posted videos of himself giving advice on mindset. The key to wealth isn't working hard, he said in one video, holding a cigar he didn't know how to smoke. It's about leverage. It's about being in the room. I made my first $4 million by taking risks while others were sleeping. I watched that video in my office, surrounded by the 3,000 employees who actually work for a living. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my water. He made his first $4 million by blackmailing his mother and selling a stolen car. But in Julian's mind, he had rewritten history. He actually believed he was a genius. Mr. Finch's report on Julian was alarming, even for me. Crypto investments, high risk, $1.5 million. NFT purchases, $500,000. Consulting fees, $200,000. Lifestyle expenses, monthly, $80,000. Julian was bleeding cash. He was investing in coins named after dog breeds and buying digital pictures of monkeys. He was surrounding himself with business partners who were clearly con artists feeding off his arrogance. 6 months in, estimated remaining capital, Clara, $2.1 million, asset rich, cash poor, Julian, $1.2 million, cash heavy, asset zero. They were halfway through their fortunes in half a year. I sat there, looking at the numbers. A normal mother would have intervened. A normal mother would have flown to Paris and Dubai, grabbed them by the shoulders and screamed, "Stop! You are ruining your future!" But I wasn't saving them anymore. I was letting them learn. And then the first crack appeared. It was a Tuesday in November. My assistant, Sarah, buzzed me. "Mrs. Vance, there is a bill here from American Express, the Centurion card." "The black card?" I frowned. "I paid my bill." "No, ma'am, it's the supplemental card, the one issued to Julian Vance. It wasn't canceled." I froze. I had canceled their personal cards, the ones linked to their allowances, but the Centurion, the emergency card, the one with the limitless limit, I had forgotten it existed. Julian must have kept it in his wallet for years, never using it, waiting for a moment like this. "How much is the charge?" I asked. $42,000, a hotel suite in the Maldives. Julian had run out of his own liquidity, or maybe he just wanted to test the waters. He wanted to see if the Bank of Mom was truly closed, or if the door was just jammed. He was testing the fence like a velociraptor. "Deny the charge," I said instantly. "Ma'am, call American Express, tell them the card was stolen and report it as fraud, and tell them to decline the transaction." "But Mr. Julian is currently at the hotel. If we decline it, they might kick him out." "If he's at a $40,000 a night hotel, he should have the funds to pay for it," I said, my voice turning to ice. "He's a multi-millionaire, Sarah. He has $4 million. Why is he using my card?" "I don't know." "I do. He's checking if I'm still watching. He's checking if I still care." "So decline it?" "Decline it. Cancel the card and send a notification to his email." I hung up. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Julian. It was the first time he had called in 6 months. I let it ring. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. I declined the call. Then a text message appeared.
Mom, there's a mistake with the Amex. I'm at the checkout. It's embarrassing. Fix it ASAP. Attributes of the message: no hello, no how are you, just a command, fix it. I typed my reply slowly. You have $4 million, Julian. Use your own debit card. The Vance estate is closed for business. Enjoy the Maldives. I blocked the number for 24 hours. I imagined the scene: Julian, tanned and hungover, standing in a lobby full of beautiful people with his black card declined. The humiliation, the panic, the sudden realization that the safety net was truly physically gone. He probably had to liquidate some of his precious crypto on the spot to pay the bill. He probably lost money on the exchange rate. Good. That night, looking at the skyline, I felt a pang of sadness, not for the money, but for the fact that even with $4 million in his pocket, his first instinct was still to reach into mine. He hadn't learned a thing. But he would. Mr. Finch's latest projection landed on my desk. Projected insolvency date: Julian, 8 months. Clara, 14 months. The clock was ticking. The high life was peaking. Now comes the hangover. And the hangover of a $4 million party is a very, very painful thing.
There is a saying in the stock market: the bull walks up the stairs, but the bear jumps out the window. It means that building wealth takes time, patience, and effort. But losing it happens in a heartbeat. It happens in the blink of an eye. It had been 14 months since the great severance. 14 months since my children signed away their birthright for $4 million each. For the first year, they were flying, but gravity is patient. Gravity always wins. The first crack appeared in Dubai. Mr. Finch sent me the alert at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. It wasn't a spending report this time. It was a market alert. The cryptocurrency market had crashed, a massive systemic correction. The coins that Julian had bet his entire existence on, the ones with the funny dog names and the promises of going to the moon, had plummeted 90% in 4 hours. But Julian hadn't just bought coins. If he had done that, he would still have 10% left. No, Julian was smart. Julian was a visionary. He had traded on margin. He had borrowed money from the exchange to buy more, using his initial $4 million as collateral. When the market dropped, the exchange issued a margin call. They liquidated everything he had to cover the loans. I didn't need a spy to tell me what happened next. I heard it directly from the source. My private line rang at 7 a.m. "Mom?" It was Julian, but the arrogance was gone. The crypto king voice was replaced by the shaky, high-pitched whimper of a scared little boy. "Hello, Julian," I said, sipping my tea. "How is Dubai?" It's bad, Mom. Listen, I need to talk to you about a business proposition, a bridge loan, just a short-term thing." "I don't do bridge loans for startups without a 5-year audit," I said calmly. "It's not a startup," he shouted, his voice cracking. "It's me. It's your son. Mom, I got wiped out. The market, it was manipulated. The whales dumped everything. It's not my fault. I lost a lot." "How much is a lot, Julian?" There was a long silence on the other end. "Everything," he whispered. "And I owe money to the platform and to some investors I brought in. They're calling me, Mom. They're threatening me. I need $500,000 just to clear the debt. I can get a job. I can work it off, but I need to pay these guys today." I closed my eyes. A part of me, the mother part, wanted to write the check. $500,000 was nothing to me. It was a rounding error in my quarterly taxes. I could save him with a stroke of a pen. But then I remembered the smiley face text he sent me after selling his father's car. I remembered the way he looked at me at the dinner table like I was nothing but a signature.
You have a problem, Julian, but it sounds like a personal problem. You signed a document. You have your $4 million. Where is it? It's gone. I told you, it's gone. Mom, please, they are going to take my passport. I can't leave the country. Then I suggest you find a job in Dubai. I hear the hospitality industry is booming. You always liked hotels. Maybe you can carry bags in one. You can't be serious. You're going to let them kill me? Drama doesn't suit you, Julian. Nobody's going to kill you for $500,000. They will just make you very uncomfortable. Welcome to the real world. It has consequences. I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was shaking. It is not easy to hear your child beg. It is not easy to be the villain in their story. But I had to be the villain so they could finally become the heroes of their own lives or the victims of their own stupidity. Then the second crack, Clara. 2 weeks after Julian's call, a letter arrived at my office. It wasn't from Clara. It was from a French law firm representing a landlord in Les Marais. Subject: Madame Clara Vance, default of payment and eviction notice. Apparently, the aesthetic doesn't pay the rent. Clara spent so much money renovating the loft that she forgot she still had to pay the mortgage and the taxes. And the gallery? It was a black hole. Jean-Luc, the beetroot artist, had left her. He ran off with a 60-year-old heiress who actually bought his paintings. Without Jean-Luc, the gallery had no art. Without art, it had no sales. And without sales, Clara had no income. She hadn't called me yet. Clara was too proud, too stubborn. Instead, she did something worse. She called Julian. Mr. Finch sent me the transcript of a voice message Clara left for her brother. Julian, pick up. I need cash. The French government is freezing my accounts because I didn't pay the VAT tax. I didn't know I had to pay tax on art I didn't sell. You have to wire me 50 grand. Mom won't answer my emails. You're the crypto king, right? Help me. I almost felt sorry for them. They were two drowning swimmers trying to climb on top of each other to breathe. That evening, I went to a charity gala at the Met Museum. I wore the emerald necklace, the one Julian had demanded as part of the deal. Wait, why did I have the necklace? Because 3 days ago, I bought it back. Julian, in his desperation to pay off his crypto debts, had pawned Grandma's emeralds at a shop in Dubai. The pawnbroker, seeing the Vance name on the certificate of authenticity, had contacted my office to verify it wasn't stolen. I bought it back for 60 cents on the dollar. I touched the cold stones around my neck. They felt heavy. My children were not just broke, they were broken. Julian was hiding in a rental apartment in Dubai, terrified of his creditors. Clara was squatting in her own Energy Flow loft in Paris, waiting for the police to evict her. The foundation had not just cracked, it had collapsed. And the worst part? They still didn't understand why. They blamed the market, they blamed the taxes, they blamed the bad luck. They still didn't blame themselves. As I stood there in the museum, holding a glass of champagne, a young man approached me. He was a journalist for Forbes. "Mrs. Vance," he smiled, "you look radiant. Your company just posted record profits. To what do you attribute your success?" I smiled back, a genuine, icy smile. "Risk management and knowing when to cut your losses." "And your children?" he asked politely. "Are they involved in the business?" "My children are on a sabbatical," I said. "They are currently enrolled in a very expensive, very exclusive educational program." "Oh, which university?" "The University of Life. The tuition is exorbitant, but I hear the lessons stick." I walked away. The winter had arrived for Julian and Clara, and I was the only one with a coat. But I wasn't going to give it to them yet. They needed to freeze a little longer. They needed to feel the cold in their bones. Because only when you are truly cold do you appreciate the warmth of a fire you built yourself. However, I knew something they didn't. The rock bottom they thought they had hit, it wasn't the bottom. It was just a ledge. The real fall was about to begin, because desperate people do desperate things, and my children were about to make the mistake of trying to come home.
There is a biblical story about the prodigal son. He takes his inheritance, leaves home, wastes it all on wild living, and returns broke. In the story, the father sees him from afar, runs to him, embraces him, and kills the fatted calf for a feast. It is a beautiful story about forgiveness, but I have always found it lacking in one key detail: accountability. The father in that story was a bad manager. If you reward failure with a feast, you are not teaching a lesson, you are subsidizing incompetence. It was February, 18 months since they signed the papers. I knew they were coming. Mr. Finch had tracked their movements. Julian had been deported from Dubai for overstaying his visa and unpaid debts. Clara had been evicted from the Paris loft and had to sell her designer clothes to buy a plane ticket. They landed at JFK at 4 p.m. They didn't take a limousine, they took the subway, and then they walked the last 6 blocks in the snow. I watched them on the monitor. They looked like ghosts of the people who had left this building. Julian was thin. His crypto tan had faded into a sickly gray. He was wearing a light jacket, completely unsuited for a New York winter. He was shivering violently. Clara was dragging 2 suitcases, her entire life packed into polycarbonate shells. Her hair, usually perfectly blow-dried, was matted and wet. She looked older, harder. They approached the revolving doors. They tried to push through. The doors didn't move. I had instructed the building management to deactivate their biometric fobs the day they left. I saw Julian banging on the glass. He was shouting something. I couldn't hear him through the screen, but I could read his lips. "Let us in." The night doorman, Henry, stepped out. Henry has worked for me for 20 years. He held Julian when he was a baby. He taught Clara how to ride a bike in the park. I saw Henry's posture. He was stiff, formal. This was hurting him, I knew, but Henry is a professional. He opened the side door just a crack. He didn't let them in. He stood in the gap, a human shield. My intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Vance?" Henry's voice crackled. "Your visitors are here." "I see them, Henry," I said. "They are demanding access to the penthouse. Mr. Julian says he lost his keys. Miss Clara is, well, she is crying, ma'am." "Put them on," I said. There was a fumble of static, and then Julian's voice filled my kitchen. Mom, what the hell is going on? The fob isn't working. Henry won't let us up. It's freezing out here. Open the damn door." "Hello, Julian," I said. My voice was calm, contrasting with his panic. "You seem to be confused. You don't live here." "What? Stop playing games. We're back. The trip, it didn't work out. We need to come home, just for a while, until we get back on our feet." "You don't have a home here, Julian. You sold your right to this home. Do you remember the document? Clause 5? "That was a piece of paper," Clara screamed. I could hear the wind howling in her phone background. "We are your children. You can't leave us on the street in a blizzard. I have nowhere to go, Mom. I have no money. I haven't eaten since the plane." "You had $4 million, Clara, 18 months ago. That is more money than Henry earns in 10 lifetimes. If you are hungry, it is because you chose to starve." "We made mistakes," Julian yelled. "Okay, is that what you want to hear? We screwed up. We were stupid. We're sorry. Now let us in." "I accept your apology, but an apology is not a key." I looked at the monitor. Julian was trying to push past Henry. Henry, who is 60 years old but built like a linebacker, didn't budge.
He gently but firmly pushed Julian back into the snow. "Mom," Julian sounded desperate now. "Please, I'm begging you, just for tonight. I'll sleep on the floor. I'll do anything." This was the moment, the fatted calf moment. If I let them up, everything I had done would be meaningless. If I gave them a warm bed and a hot meal tonight, they would learn that no matter how much they steal, no matter how much they betray me, I will always be their safety net. And a safety net is a hammock for laziness. I cannot let you in, for your own sake. For our sake? You're killing us. No, I am saving you. I am forcing you to do the one thing you have never done, survive. Where are we supposed to go? Clara sobbed. Henry has an envelope for you. I saw Henry reach into his jacket pocket and hand a white envelope to Julian. Julian tore it open, his frozen fingers fumbling. He probably expected a check or cash. He pulled out the contents. It was 2 plastic cards and a piece of paper. "What is this?" Julian stared at it. "Those are Metro cards, prepaid for 1 week, and the paper is a reservation confirmation. I have paid for 2 rooms at the Motel 6 near JFK for 3 nights. "A Motel 6? Julian looked at the paper as if it were radioactive. "In Queens? You want us to stay in a dump?" "It is a roof, Julian, and it is paid for, which is more than you can afford right now." "I hate you!" Clara screamed at the intercom. "I hate you! You are a monster!" "Perhaps, but I am a monster who is paying for your hotel. You have 3 days, Clara. 3 days to find a job, 3 days to figure out your life. I suggest you start heading to the subway. It's a long ride." "We're not going," Julian shouted. "We're going to stand right here until you let us in. The neighbors will see. It will be a scandal." "The neighbors know I value security. If you are not off the property in 5 minutes, Henry will call the police. And since you have a record of trespassing now, I don't think you want that. Goodbye, children." I pressed the button. The connection cut. I went back to the monitor. I watched them. They stood there for a minute staring up at the camera. I knew they couldn't see me, but they knew I was watching. Julian threw the envelope on the ground in a fit of rage. The wind caught the reservation paper and blew it across the sidewalk. Then I saw Clara do something interesting. She chased the paper. She ran after it, stepping into a puddle of slush, and stomped her boot on it to catch it. She picked it up. She wiped the snow off the paper. She walked back to Julian, grabbed his arm, and shouted something at him. She pointed to the subway station. Julian looked at the building one last time. He looked defeated. He slumped his shoulders. He picked up his bag. They walked away, 2 dark figures disappearing into the white swirl of the storm. I turned off the monitor. I sat in the silence of my kitchen. My tea had gone cold. I cried then. I let myself cry for exactly 10 minutes. I cried for the little boy with the golden hair and the little girl who liked to paint. I cried for the mother I used to be. But then I dried my eyes because I knew something they didn't. The Motel 6 wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a test. I had arranged one more thing, a job interview. Not a job at Vance Logistics. No, a job at a place where the name Vance meant nothing. If they survived the motel, they might just survive the interview. The fatted calf was not on the menu tonight. Tonight, the menu was humble pie, and they were going to eat every single crumb.
Dignity is a funny thing. When you are rich, dignity is about reputation. It's about having the right table at the restaurant, the right seat on the board, the right name on the building. But when you are poor, dignity is much simpler. Dignity is a hot shower. Dignity is a meal you paid for yourself. Dignity is not having to ask a stranger for permission to use the bathroom. My children were about to learn the difference. They checked into the Motel 6 near JFK Airport at 8:30 p.m., room 204. It was a room with 2 twin beds, a carpet that smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner, and a window that rattled every time a Boeing 747 took off overhead. According to the report from Mr. Finch, Julian spent the first hour screaming at the front desk clerk because there was no room service. He demanded to speak to the manager. The clerk, a tired woman who had seen everything, told him the vending machine was down the hall and to lower his voice or she would call the cops. Julian retreated. He sat on the bed, the polyester bedspread stiff and cold, and stared at the wall. For the first time in his life, there was no butler, no maid, no mom, just the hum of the mini-fridge and the realization that he was hungry. They survived the first night on a bag of pretzels and tap water. The next morning, the reality of the 3-day limit set in. I had paid for 3 nights. After that, they would be on the street. Inside the envelope Henry gave them, along with the Metro cards and the reservation, there was a second piece of paper, a business card. Staff Pro Solutions, temporary and day labor. Address, Queens Boulevard. Ask for Brenda. I had set this up. Brenda used to be a shift manager at one of my warehouses. She was tough, fair, and had absolutely zero patience for nonsense. I told her 2 referrals were coming. I told her not to give them special treatment. In fact, I told her to give them the opposite. At 9 a.m., Julian and Clara stood in the waiting room of the staffing agency. It was a stark contrast to the waiting rooms they were used to. No leather chairs, no espresso machines, just rows of plastic seats filled with people in work boots and heavy coats, people who looked tired, people who needed work to feed their families. Julian and Clara stood out like sore thumbs. Julian was wearing a tailored Italian coat that was now stained with salt and slush. Clara was wearing Balenciaga boots that were never designed for walking on concrete. "Vance?" Brenda called out from behind the glass partition. They walked up. "I'm Julian Vance," Julian said, straightening his tie. "And this is my sister. I believe my mother, Eleanor Vance, contacted you. We are looking for a management position, consulting work, perhaps. I have extensive experience in crypto finance and international branding." Brenda looked at Julian. She looked at his stained coat. She looked at his shaking hands. Then she laughed. It was a dry smoker's laugh. "Honey," Brenda said, "this is day labor. We don't do crypto. We do cleaning, packing, and serving. You want a job? I have 2 openings left for today." "I am not cleaning toilets," Julian scoffed. "Do you know who I am?" "You're a guy with a dirty coat in a temp agency in Queens," Brenda said flatly. "Take it or leave it. The guy behind you is ready to work." Julian turned to leave. "Come on, Clara. We're not doing this. We'll find an investor. I still have contacts." Clara didn't move. She was looking at a flyer on the wall. Minimum wage, $15 an hour, daily payout. She did the math. $15 an hour. If she worked 10 hours, she could buy food, she could buy shampoo, she could buy a ticket to somewhere, anywhere but here. "What are the jobs?" Clara asked. Her voice was small. "Clara," Julian hissed, "don't humiliate yourself." "I'm hungry, Julian," she snapped back. "Shut up." Brenda nodded at Clara. "I like you. You got spark. I got a spotted Burger Barn. The dishwasher quit. It's greasy, it's hot, but you get a free meal per shift." "I'll take it," Clara said. "And for Mr. Wall Street," Brenda looked at Julian, "I got a valet gig at the airport parking lot. It's cold, you're outside all day moving cars. Tips are okay if you don't scratch anything." Julian looked at Clara. He looked at the door. He looked at his empty pockets. "Valet?" he whispered. "I used to own a McLaren." "Now you get to park Fords," Brenda said, stamping a form.
Here's your vest. Don't be late. The shuttle leaves in 10 minutes. And so the humiliation began. I wish I could say they excelled. I wish I could say they rolled up their sleeves and found the dignity in labor immediately. But that's a movie trope. Real life is messier. Clara's shift. Clara arrived at Burger Barn at 11 a.m. The manager, a man named Rick, threw a grease-stained apron at her. "Scrape the plates, rock 'em, spray 'em, push 'em through," Rick barked. "And don't look at your phone. You break it, you buy it." Clara had never washed a dish in her life. We had housekeepers. Then she had money. The first hour was a disaster. She broke 3 plates. She burned her hand on the hot water. The steam ruined her hair. Her Balenciaga boots slipped on the greasy floor. At 1 p.m., the lunch rush hit. It was chaos. Plates piled up like skyscrapers. People yelled. "Hey, princess, faster!" Rick shouted. Clara froze. She was covered in ketchup and half-eaten fries. She started to cry. She dropped a tray of glasses. Crash! The entire kitchen stopped. "Get out," Rick said. "You're useless." Clara stood there, shaking. If she left now, she got nothing. No money, no food. And then a memory hit her. The memory of my voice on the intercom. If you are hungry, it is because you chose to starve. She bent down. She picked up a piece of broken glass. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was trembling, but it was audible. I'll pay for the glasses from my shift. Please, I need this." Rick looked at her. He saw the desperation in her eyes. "Clean it up," he grunted. "You got 5 minutes." She cleaned it up. She finished the shift. She washed dishes for 8 hours straight. Her manicure was destroyed. Her back screamed. At the end of the day, Rick handed her $60 in cash and a wrapped cheeseburger. Clara sat on the curb outside the restaurant, in the cold, and ate that cheeseburger. She told me later it was the best meal she had ever had. Julian's shift. Julian's day was different. Julian's hell was specific to his ego. He was assigned to the long-term parking lot C. His job was to take keys from travelers, park their cars in the back lot, and run back to the booth. He was wearing a neon yellow vest over his designer coat. At 2 p.m., a car pulled up. It was a Mercedes S-Class, brand new. Julian opened the door. The driver stepped out. It was a man Julian knew, a former friend from the club scene in Manhattan, a guy named Todd who used to beg Julian to invites to our parties. Todd looked at Julian. He looked at the vest. "Julian?" Todd asked, squinting behind his sunglasses. "Julian Vance? Is that you?" Julian wanted to die. He wanted the asphalt to open up and swallow him whole. "No," Julian said, looking down, pulling his cap lower. "My name is John." "Dude, it's totally you," Todd laughed, pulling out his phone. "Holy crap, what happened? Did Daddy cut you off? Wait, I gotta get a pic for the group chat." He snapped a photo. "Park it carefully, Jules." Todd tossed the keys at him. "Don't scratch it. It costs more than your life." Todd walked away laughing. Julian stood there, holding the warm key fob. He was shaking with rage. He wanted to key the car. He wanted to steal it and drive off a cliff. But he didn't, because he remembered the motel. He remembered the cold. He got in the car. He adjusted the seat. He drove it to the back lot. He parked it perfectly. He walked back to the booth, head down, tears freezing on his cheeks. He made $80 that day. The reunion. That night, back at room 204, they didn't fight. They didn't talk about plans or investments. Clara put her $60 on the nightstand. Julian put his $80 next to it. $140. "We have enough for another night," Clara whispered, looking at her blistered hands. "And food," Julian said, his voice hoarse. "We can buy bread and peanut butter." They looked at each other. They were exhausted. They smelled of grease and exhaust fumes. They were humiliated. They were broken. But for the first time in their lives, they had earned their sleep. I watched the report come in from Brenda the next morning. Subject, the referrals. Notes, the girl is slow but stubborn. She stayed. The guy has an attitude, but he didn't quit. They are coming back tomorrow. I smiled. Humiliation is painful, yes, but it is also...
There is a law in physics called momentum. It is hard to start moving a heavy object, but once it is moving, it is hard to stop. For 6 months, my children were stagnant. They were just surviving, treading water in the ocean of minimum wage. But around month 7, something shifted. The momentum kicked in. They had moved out of the Motel 6. The daily rate was bleeding them dry, a lesson in the poverty tax that I was glad they learned. They found a basement studio in Astoria. It was damp. It had one small window that looked out onto a sidewalk, and the landlord demanded cash. But it was theirs. I visited the neighborhood once in my tinted car. I saw Clara walking home with grocery bags. She wasn't buying truffles and champagne. She was buying rice, beans, and frozen vegetables. She was comparison shopping. Mr. Finch's reports became less about disasters and more about progress. Julian's evolution. Julian was still parking cars, but he wasn't just parking them anymore. You see, Julian grew up listening to me talk about logistics. He grew up hearing about efficiency, bottlenecks, and flow. He thought he ignored it, but osmosis is a powerful thing. 3 months into his job at the airport lot, he noticed a problem. The retrieval system was inefficient. During peak hours, customers waited 20 minutes for their cars because the valets were parking randomly. Julian, the same man who crashed a crypto startup, created a system. He color-coded the keys based on the return flight times. He reorganized the back lot grid. He went to his boss, the man who owned the lot, and pitched it, not as a visionary CEO, but as a guy who wanted to go home on time. The boss implemented it. Wait times dropped by 40%. Julian didn't get stock options. He got a $2 an hour raise and a promotion to shift lead. Mr. Finch sent me a photo of Julian wearing a shirt with a name tag that said manager. He looked tired. He looked older, but he was standing straight. He wasn't slouching. Clara's evolution. Clara had graduated from the dishwasher pit. Rick, the manager at Burger Barn, realized that while Clara was a terrible dishwasher, she was charming. She became a waitress. At first, she hated it. Serving people she used to look down on, it was torture. But then she realized that tips are a commission. The better the service, the higher the payout. Clara turned her socialite charm into a weapon. She remembered regulars' names, she upsold desserts, she managed the angry customers with a smile that was fake but effective. She was averaging $200 a night in tips. She was saving. The crisis. But the true test of their new reality came in August. It was a Tuesday, 2 a.m. Mr. Finch called me. He usually only texted, so I knew it was serious. "Mrs. Vance," he said, "there is a situation at the apartment." What kind of situation? I sat up in bed, my heart hammering. Julian is sick. He cut his hand at the lot 2 days ago. He didn't treat it properly. It's infected. He has a high fever. He's delirious. Is he in the hospital? No, ma'am. They are debating it. They don't have insurance. They are worried about the cost. I felt the urge to launch the rescue mission. I could have an ambulance there in 5 minutes. I could have him in a private suite at Mount Sinai in 20. Stay watching, I told Finch. Let me know if they call 911. If he loses consciousness, intervene. Until then, hold. I stared at my phone. Call me, I thought. Call me, Clara. Ask for help. Break the silence. I waited. In the basement apartment, the scene was playing out. I learned the details later. Julian was shaking on the mattress, sweat soaking through the sheets. His hand was red and swollen, the infection tracking up his arm. "We have to go to the ER," Clara said, grabbing her coat. "No," Julian chattered, his teeth clattering. "Can't afford it. The savings, we have 2,000. The bill will be 5. "I don't care," Clara shouted. "You have blood poisoning, you idiot. You could die." "Call Mom," Julian whispered. It was a weak, broken plea. "Just call her. She'll fix it." Clara picked up her phone. She pulled up my contact. It was right there. Mom. She hovered her thumb over the call button. One tap, that's all it took. One tap and the nightmare would end. The helicopter would arrive. The warm bed would return. The safety net would catch them. But Clara looked at Julian. She looked at their dingy apartment. She looked at the jar of cash on the counter, their freedom fund. If she called me, they lost. If she called me, the last 8 months meant nothing. They would just be the spoiled children who couldn't handle the real world. Clara put the phone down. "No," she said, "we are not calling her." "Julian, get up," she commanded, hauling him up. She was strong now. Lifting trays of food had built muscle. "We are going to the city hospital, the public one. They have to treat you by law. We will wait in line, and we will pay what we can." "It's going to be awful," Julian moaned. "Yeah, it is," Clara said, wrapping a scarf around his arm. "But it's our awful." She dragged him out to the street. She hailed a cab. She counted out the cash for the fare. They spent 14 hours in the waiting room of Queen's General. Julian received IV antibiotics. The doctor stitched his hand and lectured him on hygiene. When the billing department came, Clara didn't cry. She didn't beg. She negotiated. She set up a payment plan, $50 a month for the next 2 years. They walked out of the hospital into the morning sun. They were exhausted. They were broke again. But Julian was alive. And they hadn't called me. I received the text from Mr. Finch at 10 a.m. Subject, outcome. Status, treated and released. They paid a deposit, heading home. No contact made with HQ. I put the phone down and walked to my balcony. I poured a glass of champagne. It was 10 a.m., but I didn't care. I toasted the empty air. "Congratulations," I whispered. "You just graduated." They didn't know it yet, but they had just passed the final exam. They had chosen dignity over comfort. They had chosen each other over my money. They were ready. But I wasn't going to just open the door and hand them a check. That would undo everything. No, the re-entry had to be earned just as hard as the exit. I needed to see them one last time, but not as their mother. I needed to see them as a CEO. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus Sterling. "Marcus," I said, "draft a letter. Send it to their basement address." "A legal threat?" Marcus asked, confused. "No," I smiled. "A job offer, but not from me, from a holding company. I want to buy Julian's valet system, and I want to hire Clara for a specific event." "You're going to hire them?" "I'm going to interview them," I corrected. "I want to see if they are smart enough to sell what they have learned." The winter was over. The spring had come, and the seeds I had planted in the mud were finally starting to bloom. Here is the grand finale, part 10. This chapter closes the circle. It brings them back to the room where it all started, but the people entering that room are strangers to the ones who left it 2 years ago. Project: The $8 Million Mistake. Format: long-form storytelling. Total target: 10,000 words. Current part: Part 10 of 10. Title: The Legacy, The Return on Investment. Narrator: Eleanor Vance. Part 10, The Legacy. The camera is positioned inside the main boardroom of Vance Logistics. It is a vast space of glass and polished mahogany. Eleanor stands at the head of the table. The city of New York is spread out behind her like a map. She is checking her watch. She looks nervous for the first time in the entire story. Eleanor. In business, the most dangerous moment is not the crash, it is the merger. When two entities try to combine, there is always friction. There is always the risk that the cultures will clash and destroy everything. Today was the merger I had been planning for 2 years. I had set the stage carefully. Through a shell company I control, Aurora Holdings, I had reached out to my children. To Julian, Aurora Holdings offered to buy the intellectual property rights to his dynamic parking grid system for a logistics pilot program. To Clara, Aurora Holdings offered a position as head of client relations for a new hospitality division. They didn't know Aurora was me. They thought they were meeting a mysterious angel investor who had noticed their hard work. It was 10 a.m. The heavy oak doors opened. My assistant, Sarah, walked in. She looked at me and gave a small nod. "They're here, Mrs. Vance." "Send them in," I said. I turned my back to the door. I looked out the window. I wanted to hear them before I saw them. I heard footsteps. 2 years ago, Julian walked with a heavy, arrogant stomp. Clara walked with a click-clack of stilettos. Today, the footsteps were different. They were quieter, measured, respectful of the space. "Hello?" Julian's voice. It was deeper, less nasal. "We were told to meet Mr. Sterling here for the Aurora meeting?" I turned around. They froze. Julian was wearing a suit, but it wasn't the $5,000 Armani he used to wear. It was a Men's Warehouse suit, likely bought on sale, but it was pressed. His shirt was crisp. He looked tired around the eyes, but his jawline was sharp. The bloat of alcohol and excess was gone. Clara wore a simple black dress and a blazer. No jewelry. Her hair was tied back in a practical bun. Her hands, resting on the back of a chair, were rough. I could see the faint scars of burns and cuts from the restaurant kitchen. They looked at me. There was no anger in their eyes anymore, just shock and shame. "Mom?" Clara whispered. "Please," I gestured to the chairs. "Sit down." They didn't move. "Is this a joke?" Julian asked, his hands balling into fists. "Is this another lesson? Did you bring us here to laugh at us? Because if you did, we're leaving. I have a shift at 4 p.m. "It's not a joke, Julian, and it's not a lesson. It's a business meeting. Sit down." They hesitated. They looked at each other, a silent communication of shared trauma and survival, and then they sat. They sat straight. They didn't slouch. I placed 2 thick folders on the table. "I read the report on your parking grid," I said to Julian. "You reduced retrieval times by 40% using a color-coded algorithm based on flight data. That is impressive." "It was just common sense," Julian muttered, looking at the table. "The cars were bottlenecks. I fixed the flow." "It wasn't common sense," I corrected. "It was logistics. You realized that time is inventory. That is the fundamental principle of this company." I turned to Clara. "And you? I spoke to Rick at Burger Barn. He says you are the only waitress who can upsell the dessert menu to customers who only came in for water. He says you managed a grease fire last month without evacuating the dining room. You kept the customers calm." "I just talked to them," Clara shrugged. "People just want to be heard." "Exactly. Crisis management, client retention." I tapped the folders. "Aurora Holdings is me, obviously, but the offers are real." I opened Julian's folder. "I am offering to buy your system for Vance Logistics. I want to implement it in our shipping container yards in New Jersey. The starting salary for the project manager position is $120,000 a year." I opened Clara's folder. "I am offering you the position of Director of Client Services. You will deal with our high net worth partners, the people who scream when their shipments are late. You will calm them down. Starting salary, $110,000. Silence.
They stared at the papers. 2 years ago, they would have laughed at these numbers. They would have called them allowance. Now they looked at the numbers like they were a fortune. But they didn't sign. Julian looked up. "And the catch?" he asked. "There's always a catch. Do we have to move back in? Do we have to become your puppets again?" "No," I said. "You can't move back in. I turned your bedrooms into a gym and a library. You will live in your own apartments. You will pay your own rent. You will show up to work at 8 a.m. like everyone else. If you are late, you will be fired. If you are incompetent, you will be fired." "And the inheritance?" Clara asked. "The document we signed?" "That document remains valid. You are still disinherited." Their faces fell slightly, but they didn't protest. However, I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a new document. It is a performance trust. For every year you remain employed and in good standing, a percentage of company stock will be vested in your name. You earn your legacy, year by year, decade by decade. "If you want the empire," I said, leaning forward, "you have to build it alongside me." Julian looked at the contract. He picked up a pen. He didn't look at me. He looked at the clause about shipping yard implementation. "I have some ideas for the New Jersey yard," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I looked at the satellite maps. Your crane positioning is inefficient." "Is it?" I smiled. "Then sign the contract and fix it." He signed. Clara looked at me. Her eyes were wet. "Why didn't you help us?" she asked. "When Julian was sick, when I was hungry, why didn't you answer the phone?" "Because," I said, my voice softening for the first time in the entire story, "because if I had answered, you would still be a child, and I need adults." She wiped her eye. She picked up the pen. "I'm going to need a wardrobe allowance," she said, a faint spark of her old sass returning. "My waitress uniform won't work for high net worth clients." "We can discuss an advance on your first paycheck," I countered. She smiled, a real smile. She signed. It was done. Meeting adjourned. We stood up. They looked awkward. The business part was over. Now we were just a mother and her children who hadn't hugged in 2 years. Julian walked around the table. He hesitated, then extended his hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Mom. Thank you for the opportunity." I ignored his hand. I pulled him into a hug. He felt thin, but he felt solid. He smelled of cheap soap and hard work. He hugged me back, tightly. Clara joined in. We stood there in the boardroom, a 3-way embrace, crying quietly. "I missed you," I whispered. "We missed you too," Clara sobbed. "And we missed the heating." We laughed. The tension broke. "Come," I said, wiping my face. "Let's go to lunch. I made a reservation at Le Bernardine." "Actually," Julian said, checking his watch, "I can't. I have to go back to the lot. I have to give my 2 weeks' notice. I can't just leave Brenda short-staffed." I looked at him. My heart swelled with so much pride it almost hurt. "You are right," I said. "Professional courtesy. Go, give your notice." "I have a shift tonight, too," Clara said. "Rick needs me for the dinner rush." "Okay," I nodded. "Then lunch is canceled. Go to work." They turned to leave. At the door, Julian stopped. "Mom?" "Yes?" "The $8 million, he said. "The money we stole, the money we wasted. We will pay it back. I don't know how long it will take, but we will pay it back. Deduct it from our salaries. I know you will." They walked out. The door closed. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. 10 minutes later, I saw them exit the building. They were walking fast, heading towards the subway. They looked like just 2 more New Yorkers rushing to work, fighting for their place in the world. I touched the glass. $8 million. People would say it was an expensive mistake. My accountant still cries when he looks at the write-off. But as I watched my children disappear into the crowd, competent, humble, and alive, I knew the truth. It wasn't a mistake. It was an investment. And looking at the returns, it was the best bargain of my life.